Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon or evening, wherever you're calling in from or dialing in from. My name's Kathy Madison, and I'm with Comtech in CIDM. I will be the moderator, and we will start in just 1 minute. I see lots of people still logging in, so give me 1 minute, and we'll go ahead and proceed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you've never been to a Comtech and CIDM webinar, just give you a little bit of a heads up. We have scheduled an hour and a half. Lawrence's talk will go about an hour, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards. I will go over a couple of intro slides, and then I'll turn it over to Lawrence. And again, my name is Kathy Madison. If you aren't familiar with Comtech and CIDM, Comtech is our consulting company, and we've been around since 1978. We provide various levels of consulting, anything to help you make your content better, whether that's helping you form a taxonomy so people can find your content better, or maybe a migration to DITA, or even just looking at your processes and how you work as a technical communication organization. So that's the Comtech side. Many, many years ago, our clients had asked us to start a member organization, and that's what the Center for Information Management Development is, Information Development Management. That's CIDM, and that's where we put on webinars like the one you're attending now. We host conferences, and we provide a newsletter, et cetera, and there's several levels of membership that you can join. On the Comtech side, we do have a couple of training classes that we have coming up. We have the web and mobile content class. It's going to start later this month. And then we have minimalism and some DITA classes, creating effective taxonomy happening in July. So many different types of topics for you to learn. And these are all online sessions happening 2 hours on a given day. And then we do have conferences and events coming up. If you're already familiar with our events, normally in the spring we do a big DITA conference. Oops, excuse me. We do a big DITA conference. And then in the fall we do one in Europe. We do one in North America and one in Europe. This year we are doing everything as a virtual experience. We're replacing those conferences along with our new Journeys conferences. We're combining them all into something new and exciting. We're getting that website up and running very quickly, transferring over from the Journeys and the DITA conferences websites over to this new Convex, which is a virtual experience for content developers. And that's going to happen in September. So we're very excited. And of course, Lawrence is calling in from Israel, and they're on a different time zone. And one of the things we're going to do with this conference is we are going to span many time zones. It's going to go on for about 16 hours a day, starting at 1:30 in the morning here in Denver, so that we can get folks in Europe and Eastern Europe and even Asia involved as well. And then we'll go a little bit longer. So we're super, super excited about this new event. But in the meantime, we do have our traditional online conference called Ideas, and that's happening in July. And then we hope to do a face-to-face later in the year in November. It's still unknown whether we can do that or not. The theme of the Ideas Summer Conference is a picture is worth 1,000 words. So it's all about doing things other than just text in your technical content, whether that's video, whether it's diagrams, whether it's animations. That's what that conference, online conference, is all about. And then we do have a couple of webinars coming up. One next week and one later in the month, so you can join those webinars as well. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Lawrence, but before I do, because I know folks have come in late, we are recording this session, and that link will be made available to you later. If you have questions, please use the questions dialog box, and we'll field those after Lawrence finishes up his presentations, which will take about an hour, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I'm thrilled. I already mentioned Lawrence is calling us from Israel. He's a product evangelist for Zoomin software, and I'm going to go ahead and make him presenter. So bear with us while we do that swap over. Okay, Lawrence, you have a perfect.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kathy. So I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Lawrence Orin. I am product evangelist and content and UX expert at Zoomin. I also have been a customer of Zoomin several times before I joined Zoomin. And today, what we're going to be talking about is how to make your writing better. Okay. Now, Zoomin is a company that does documentation portals and kind of making your content available in lots of different places. But today, we're not going to be talking about tools. We're going to be talking about the content, whatever tool you are using, which I think is really important. Okay, so I want to talk about how to make better content. Better content is better quality content. Quality is usually measured by how effective it is. Okay, so whereas tools and the people who try to sell tools, they are very focused on things like SEO, and they're focused on things like UI and making things easy and so on and so forth. I am very focused today on talking about content itself. And I'd like to start by talking to you about something that has nothing to do with technical writing. It has to do with taking pictures. Okay, so I once, I got up very early in the morning. I went out to the hills just outside Jerusalem, and the mist was there and the sun was rising, and it was amazing. And I took this shot, and she said, "Wow, that's a great picture. It must have been an amazing camera." And I thought, well, now there's an interesting comment. It's not the first time I've heard it, because there is actually a bit of a conspiracy going on. It's like a perfect storm. We've got people who take just snapshots. We've got people who love taking great pictures, but we've also got people who sell cameras. Right? And the people who sell cameras are busy saying very much that if you want to take great pictures, you need a great camera. Okay. And so, for example, this is an ad from Canon that said, effortlessly capture stunning images using the latest technology, right? Now, I understand that, and it's true. You can take, you can be much more dexterous with a really good tool, okay? But there's much more to taking a good picture than the tool that you are using. And that's why I wanted to talk about what's more than just the tools. I wanted to talk about content itself. And this, of course, goes back a long way. So here's an old Minolta ad that says, "This camera won't let you take a bad photograph." So there is this perfect storm of vendors who want to sell you tools, and they will have you believe that with this tool, you'll have amazing content, okay? And of course, it's not just cameras, okay? There are people who sell watches, right? If you wear this watch, you'll feel like James Bond. If you wear this watch, you're unstoppable. You'll get fit if you have this watch, right? And of course, it's a watch, right? So it's extremely important to differentiate, right, between a tool that can help you do something, like a pair of trainers or sneakers that would, you know, help you run a bit more quickly, but it is not a quick fix. You are not going to get fit by putting on a pair of trainers, right? So this is a shot that I took in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence of a Van Gogh painting. And you can tell the brush strokes and everything else that went into this incredible Impressionist painting. But I bet nobody asked him, that's an amazing painting, what brushes did you use, right? And what oils did you use? That's not where the art is. The art is not in the brush. It's true, if he didn't have good brushes and good paints, he would be somewhat limited, but that's not where it's at. So I think we need to come to some kind of balance between the tools and the content that is used to enhance those tools. I think we should probably agree that great tools enhance great content. Okay, so if I did have an even better camera, this picture would probably be even better. Okay, but it's not just the tool. Okay, we have to start with great content. And so this is what I wanted to talk about today, about how to make content great. So I know that when I was a technical writer for many years and I was heading different writing teams in different capacities, I get asked all the time that we want to write for customers. Everybody is being asked in their organizations to think like customers. They are asked to be customer focused. And then, of course, as the tools do progress and they allow you to find things in different ways, you're being asked to write for search. You're being asked to think about how things are found, how things are arrived at, and try to moderate your content to fit that process, right? Or search engine optimization, as is often known, SEO, right? So the question is, if you have a product, okay, and you have some content, and there are all of these features and all of these agile phases that are coming through each time, a new sprint and then hardening and so on and so forth. The question is, how do you find your way between the things that go on inside your company, which are all of these developers and project managers and product owners and product managers who are thinking about features and so on. And then there are the customer-facing people who are perhaps marketing or sales, sometimes product management if they are more externally facing, checking out what customers want. Customer support, of course, and customer success, they are very much in touch with customers. But technical writing isn't typically seen as a customer-facing profession. It's seen as a backroom profession. Now, technical writing can report to R&D. It could report to support, maybe to marketing, maybe to customer experience. There are all kinds of different areas that technical writers find themselves reporting to in some kind of reporting structure, right? But writing for customers requires thinking like customers. So I wanted to take some examples of some content that we have in our own technical writing, which right now at Zoomin needs a spring clean, if I'm being kind. And I wanted to look at some of those titles as examples of what not to do, right? So let's look at some of these things and let's see if these are writing for customers or not. So here's the title of a topic. It's called User Roles versus Content Role Groups. Now, I don't know if you know, what a content role group is, but before I joined Zoomin, I didn't know what a content role group was. I know what a user role is, but I have no idea what difference it would make. And when I'm thinking about writing for customers, well, this is not really something I'm going to be searching for, is it, as a customer? Because this is very much about the internal jargon from within Zoomin. A content role group is something that you know about when you have already learned about Zoomin. So why would you write this in a title and offer it for people to search? That's not what they're going to search for, right? Or take another one, which I'm sure you have seen in many places, managing user details. Now, this seems innocent enough. It seems quite common, in fact, to see a title like this. And it kind of makes sense. The reason that people write a title called Managing User Details is because it covers all kinds of things. Maybe you'll want to change their permissions. Maybe you want to change their role. Maybe you've got something that you need to do with them, update them, and so on. And you put it under a convenient title called Managing User Details. But again, when I'm thinking about writing for customers, when I'm thinking about writing for search, that's not really something that somebody is going to search for. Oh, I know, I'd like to manage user details. That's not something people are gonna look for. It's something that they have to do, but they don't think about it in that way. Or here's another one, uploading a category XML file. Okay, so once again, we're using jargon, okay, that is known inside Zoomin and is something that you would understand if you already knew details of the product, but of course a customer isn't thinking in terms of category XML files at all. Okay, and nor would they know what that means if they even saw it. So even seeing this title in a list of search results, I wouldn't even know if this is the appropriate one for me to click on, because it doesn't mean anything to me. Okay. Or another one, declaring a subject scheme in an ANT file, right? So even if I knew what a subject scheme was, which is more jargon, and even if I knew what an ANT file was, which is also more jargon, it's absolutely not clear to me why anybody would want to declare a subject scheme in an ANT file, right? So this is what I mean about writing for customers, or in this case, not writing for customers. And here's a really great one. I had to consider carefully if I wanted to include this in my presentation. Linking a classification map Excel file to SDL, live content architect. Right, absolutely, yep. Totally understand what that means, right? So the problem with all of these is that these are titles that are actually the answer to a question. But these aren't questions. These aren't things that customers will be writing for. So the irony of poor writing is that very often we end up writing for customers, trying to write for customers, but in order to get to the answer, they need to already know the answer, right? But if they already knew the answer, well, then they wouldn't be coming to you to find the answer in the first place, right? So it's a catch-22. So you really need to think like a customer, which means not putting the answer in the title. You have to think what a customer would think like, okay? So I thought that these examples were great. I was thinking of using other examples on the web, but then I thought perhaps I might offend somebody, so I'd much rather put myself down and roll up my sleeves and do my own work rather than talking about somebody else's writing. But I'm sure that we are not alone, and I'm sure that this is a very common thing. So how do you write for a customer? Okay, so what I tend to do is to think of an acid test, a litmus test, the test that will determine if a title is written for a customer, is a customer title, or if it's an internal title. And what I do is that I play a little role-playing game and I imagine myself as a customer, not somebody who's employed in Zoomin, but somebody who's employed in their own company, okay? And they are on their way to work. Now, of course, we don't have the joy and luxury of sitting in traffic nowadays because we're all under lockdown. But in normal times, I would be sitting in my car, I would be in traffic, and I'd be thinking about all the things that I would have to do that day. And of course, the things that I have to do that day are all about my my manager who needs me to do certain things, and I've got a to-do list, and I've got all of these tasks that I need to do, and I'm running through all of my tasks, and some of those tasks are going to require this hypothetical person using my product. Okay, now I am not the center of their universe. My products are not the center of their universe. Okay, they have 100 other things that they need to do that day, and a few of them touch on my product. Okay, if I'm lucky, lots of them, but even then, they are not interested in becoming experts about my product because they have a busy day. Okay, they just have things that they need to do. They need to get their job done and move on. And some of those things happen to require using a product that I am responsible for the documentation of. So I'm sitting in traffic and I'm thinking, when I get to work, I am going to search for this, or I'm going to try to do this bleh, whatever that thing is, right? So I'm going to think of what that thing is, and I'm going to try to do it. So I'm going to go into the office, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to open the product, and I'm going to try to do that thing, whatever that bleh, that thing was that I was thinking about in the car, okay? And maybe I'm successful and maybe I'm not. And if I can't figure out how to do it, I'll use the help. I'll use the documentation. I'll go to the documentation, and what am I going to type into the search? What am I going to be looking for? I'm going to be looking for the thing that I was thinking about on my way into work. So this is my acid test. My acid test is, would it be something that a customer would be thinking about on their way to work? And it's an excellent exercise. I can't tell you how great this is, because it really is an acid test. Anybody who says this is what your task should be, you need to imagine somebody who doesn't know much about you at all, your company. They happen to be using your product as part of a whole array of products. And they need to do something. They need to get their task done. So when it comes to writing for customers, we'll take these old titles, these titles that are currently there, we'll try to come up with some different ones. So here, for example, user roles versus content role groups. What might I be thinking about on my way into work? Well, I might be thinking about hiding some content from guest users. Or maybe I'll type in the word permissions, okay? Or, user permissions or something, which is also very interesting, because if I want to hide content, or maybe I'm typing in permissions, or maybe I'm typing in hide, then even though strictly speaking, those two are not synonyms, hide and permissions, they could, from a search point of view, from a customer focus point of view, I might want to make those two words synonyms. So when a person types hide, the search engine looks for the word permissions, or vice versa. I don't know which one it would be, but this is the kind of thinking, the kind of customer-oriented thinking that you need to have, okay? Here's another one. We spoke about managing user details. Well, probably something that I would be typing into the search engine would be changing a user password. Okay, that would be something that I would need to do on my way into work. I'd be thinking, okay, when I get in, I need to change this person's password or change their permissions or something like that. And then that would be a user task, right? That's a good example of a user task. a customer task. Here's another one. Instead of uploading a category XML file, which of course makes no sense to anyone, how about adding a tile to your documentation site? Okay, or adding a tile to your site. That's something that I can imagine. Right, I'm in my car. This is one of the things I need to do today. I need to create a new tile there. How do I do that? So maybe the word add and create become a synonym. I don't know. It's possible. So this is how you come up with your titles. So declaring a subject, schema, and ant file. Oh my God, that's really, so that would be uploading content. That's what I would do, right? That's the kind of thing that I would do. So these are the titles that I must be thinking about. And for this one, well, I just wrote shoot me please, because I have no idea what that means and I need to find it out, right? So this is an appalling title, okay? So this is what we mean by writing for customers. What we mean is trying to think how a customer would think of something, and then writing a title with their vocabulary, with their frame of reference, with their paradigms in mind. Don't tell them what the answer is before, tell them what the answer is inside this article, right? Okay, so I've got my content, I've got my, or maybe I don't have my content yet, or maybe I have legacy content that I want to restructure and rewrite. And I have to write like a customer, okay? So I'm imagining people coming into work, doing their thing. Maybe they're an IT manager and they've got admin business to deal with, or maybe they're a programmer, or maybe they're, whatever they are, HR person, whatever your audience personas are. Who in your company can give you a clue, can help you think like a customer? Who is in touch with customers all the time? Okay. So let's look at some of the classic roles that you might think of contacting in order to think like a customer, in order to get these better titles or to think about your product in a different way. Well, the first one, of course, is product managers or product owners or whatever they're called in your company. Now, these guys are hired to create features that bring value to the customer, right? So if they're doing their job properly, then not only will they be your best, they rely on you to express the value of those features, but they will also know, hopefully, all about their supposed customers. Because if they don't know about their customers, then they may be creating the wrong features or features that are completely off from the intended audience. So the first job of a good product manager, a good product owner, is to really understand and to get to grips with who is using the product. What are the kinds of people that are using the product and why are they coming to us in order to use their product? And then they want to create the features to maximize the value so that more people will buy the product because it's very valuable, so that we can serve them better, right? So that's one group of people. Another group of people is the guys in marketing, right? So marketing people need to generate new leads for new sales in order for new people to buy the product because they see the value. So obviously they know what the pains are of your audience. They know why you came to use the product in the first place, okay? And they can help you figure out what somebody driving to work may be thinking when they get into work. What will they do with your product? Of course, there are the salespeople. They go together with the marketing people, right? So the salespeople will be very interested in transmitting or communicating the value of this product very clearly to people so that they can start to use it and get value from it, okay? So they will also have a very clear idea of the kinds of things that people might be doing with the product on their way to work. There's the customer support people. Customer support people, they get to know what customers needed to do with the product, but aren't quite doing that thing with the product, right? Because the product isn't functioning the way it ought to, and so they're contacting support. So while everybody is just a little bit agitated when they contact support, right, they still have a very good idea of why people are using the product and what they want out of it. And lastly, customer success people. These are the guys who are hoping to upsell. These are the guys who are hoping to make sure that these customers continue using your product. So they also very much understand the goals of people using the product. Notice that there are no engineers in here, because engineers cannot tell you what the goals are of your customers. The engineers can tell you how to do something in the product, but they don't really have an insight in the heads of the people who are using the product. They are problem solvers. They get a request from one of these people, from the product manager, or from marketing and sales, or from the support people. This product needs to do this. And they go, aha, okay, right, so how are we going to get the product to do this? So they're very much focused on the how to do something, right? So they are involved a little bit, and you'll see later how, okay? Those are your subject matter experts later on. But for now, getting an understanding of what people need to do with your product, what their goals are, those are only front-facing, customer-facing people. Not their managers or their grand managers, the actual people in the trenches who talk to these customers all the time. They need to know, right? So you get one of these people, okay, into a room, okay? What are you going to ask them? Well, the things that you want to ask them are, please imagine your customer in a car, right? On their way to work, stuck in traffic, right? And you're going to ask them, why did these people buy our software or hardware or product, whatever it is? What problems, what pains did it come to ease? What problems did it come to solve? Why did they spend their hard-earned money, or their company spent their hard-earned money just to buy this product? Okay. How do they use the product? What do they do with it once they've bought it? So the people who can tell you why they bought it are maybe the sales and marketing people. What do they do with it once they've bought the product? Those are the product managers, the customer support people, the customer success people. They know what people do after they purchase the product. What are the common things that people do? Don't describe to me screens. Don't tell me about menu items, about field names. Tell me what they want to do. Please take me for a trip inside a typical customer's head. And of course, what value do they see in performing these tasks? So when I get into work as a customer, I'm not using your product because I have nothing better to do. I actually have a ton of things I need to do, right? And you are one of them, right? Your product is one of the things that I must do in order to get on with my day. So there is clearly a significant value that I have. These people have other things in their minds, and they have other goals. They are not interested in learning about the world of your product. They don't want to know about your XML files and about various screens and menus. That's just the means. They actually need to do this for a reason. What's the reason, and why are they doing it? What's the value that they get? So you grab one of these people, or several of them, if you're brave, put them in a room for a 90-minute meeting, okay? And it's really a very structured process. And I've done this a couple of times, and I cannot tell you how liberating it is, how cool it is to come out of this. So you start writing down tasks. You ask them these questions. Okay, what are people doing with the product? Why are they doing it with the product? What are the main things they do? What are the little things that they do? Okay, and why are they doing the little things? What's the big thing that they're trying to do overall, right? And you write these tasks down, and then you start, you can use something like OneNote or Evernote or one of those tools that allow you very quickly to demote and promote things in a list. So you can take a clump of tasks and then you can move them all under another meta task, for example. So you start organizing these tasks and you nest them in these different lists. Okay, and then you end up with a tree of tasks. It's actually just a 90-minute meeting. You don't need more. And it's a tree of tasks for a particular product. Now, maybe there are several trees. So you start, you just organically nest things until you have more or less a meta task or several meta tasks inside a product, for example. And each tree then becomes a table of contents. Okay. Now, in the olden days, we wrote manuals for audiences. We would say this is an admin guide because this is what the admins want, and this is a user guide, this is what users want, and this is an installation guide because this is what the deployment guys want, right? I don't know if that's great or not great, okay, but definitely having a tree of tasks and organically seeing how these trees take shape is hugely inspiring. And then as you build up your group of people who build these trees, you can then validate trees one against the other. And you can take a tree that you got from, say, a product manager and ask a salesperson, so what do you think? This is what we've got so far. What do you think? More or less, this, that. And they can embellish the tree, they can change the tree, and then you can put the two in a room if they disagree with each other and try to work out what people do with the product. And you would be amazed how educational it is both for them and for you. Because this is true customer thinking. So you have this hierarchy that you have created, this nested list that you have created in whatever note format you have, and that of course translates into some kind of tree, okay, which is your table of contents. Then so you need to say, okay, so what am I going to do first? And then you prioritize each of these. So you attach a priority next to each of these things, saying which one, or you color code it, whatever you want, which one's a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, okay? And you start to build this thing out gradually. Now, when you build things out gradually, okay, each one of these boxes becomes a topic, right, or an article, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, so in Data World, it's a topic usually, but let's call it an article. Okay, or a page, whatever you want. Okay, now when you decide what to write, we've got the title now. The title is the task. Okay, the customer task. But how do you decide what goes inside it? And my recommendation would be to take some lessons from people who have been writing from an industry that has been writing far longer than us, which is journalism. Okay, now journalists, whatever you may think of their opinions, which we're not going to go into now, okay, but they have a skill, and that skill is not to be treated lightly, because they have a skill where their editor says that they need to write something in record speed. And they have another skill, which is that they need to be able to tell people what this story is about very, very, very quickly. And there is, in fact, a very well-established paradigm that they use, which is called the inverted pyramid. And they use this in order to write their articles and to show people what they what this article is about very, 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 very quickly. So you'll see that within the first half of any news article, they have managed, within sometimes just one sentence, a single sentence, they managed to squash in the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why, and sometimes even how, in a single sentence. That is incredible minimalism. okay? And I have always had huge respect for this ability. So you have this inverted pyramid where you start with the main details, the absolute synthesis. It's kind of reduced down to a thick source, right? And this is the most important bits that you need to know, and then you carry on. And then you go with the important details and then slightly less important details and so on as you read down the article. And this, of course, is very important in our world because people land on a product content page and they don't know whether they've clicked on the right link or the wrong link, and they need to know very quickly if it's appropriate or not. Okay, so this idea of who, what, when, where, and why is a paradigm that I think works very, very, very well for technical product content. So here's an example of an article that I saw very recently on the BBC about a plan for Microsoft to replace journalists with robots, okay? And if you have a look, we've got who, which is Microsoft, what, which has replaced dozens of contract journalists, okay? Notice that they managed to squeeze in several adjectives in order to make such minimalism, all in one sentence, right? Where, on the MSN website. Why? Because they want to have automated systems to select the news stories. And oddly enough, for somebody who is for an industry that tries so hard to be minimalist, in most articles today, especially on the web, there will be an image. Okay, and I'd like to call that out for a second. Why on earth, if I'm being so condensed, do I want to have an image in there, right? And the answer, and of course, we'll be talking about this in another webinar, the one that was mentioned a little bit earlier for CIDM, the ideas webinar, which is going to be about diagrams are worth 1,000 words. Well, we'll be talking a lot more about the importance of images in technical content. But journalists see this, they know it intuitively, that there are some people who need an image in order to ground themselves. It kind of makes sense when I see an image, okay? We'll be talking about that a lot more. So when we're looking at a topic that we're writing, an article that we're writing, how would it look, okay? Well, we started with the title. That was our locked room with our customer-facing people, the product managers and the salespeople and so on. We've got a customer task. That's our title. So that when somebody types it into the search engine, a customer typing into the search engine, they're going to find their task. Okay? So what am I going to put first after I've got the task? Well, we've got our 5 W's. Well, not quite 5. We've got 4 of the W's. It's really important to say why you want to do something, because this is the value that people have. That's why I said that we need to speak to the sales and marketing people and to the product managers, because they will understand the reason for a feature. So often in product content, we are so focused on the how, and we don't ask why. And the why is exceptionally important. And if your product content is available to non-customers, this is even more important because it's the reason that people buy the product. You are actually promoting your product, helping sales, helping marketing in your technical product content. Okay, so why is very important. The one W that we're missing is who. But that's nearly always you, right? So you always write in the second person, usually imperative. So you're writing, this is what you must do in order to do this, this, and this. So it's always you. So the who is you, okay? But you can definitely write the what, the when, the where, and the why, okay? And try to take a leaf out of these journalists who have this incredible skill of squashing all those W's into a single sentence sometimes, as you saw just now. Incredible, really. So I take my hat off to them. They're really, it's an amazing thing. Then, of course, we have an image. We'll talk about that at a later webinar, but having images for visually focused people is hugely important cognitively. And there is research about this, and we'll talk about it later. There are lots of technical writers who don't like images, okay, because they are cumbersome. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of effort. I understand that, but I'm just saying, images are very important for lots of people because they're visually wired. Okay, and then down at the bottom of your inverted pyramid are your details, perhaps some caveats, perhaps some more images, and so on. And then there's the procedure, and the procedure is the how, right? Those are the steps that you put, and that's the SME, and that's when you talk to the engineers, right? That's when you talk to R&D. With the how. Okay, so actually most of what we are writing here before we get to the actual steps is hugely important to provide a context and also to help people find your content, to think like a customer. And the basic idea of a topic is that it should be a self-contained semantic unit. Okay, that means that I've landed here and I need to perform a task. Remember, I've come in from my traffic jam, right? And I've come into the office, I've grabbed my cup of coffee, I'm sitting down at my desk, and now I need to do something, right? So what I don't want to do is to go to the help and then have to click in 100 places in order to do what I need to do. I came here to do something. This is my task, and now I need to do it. So all of the content that I need in order to accomplish this task should be here, okay? So when you write with main customer tasks, then first of all, it's like somebody opened the window. It's a breath of fresh air. And you can then see the main tasks of a product and work with those. And it kind of, those conversations don't just change documentation, they change the people you're speaking to too. Okay, they also affect the way that those people start thinking about their product. They're like, oh yeah, right. People do come especially for this. Why is it so hard to find in my screens, in my UI? And they go and make changes because of that. But the other thing that you need to consider is that some tasks, they traverse products. They run across different products. And that's why you have solution thinking coming in, okay? So some products, and that's typical, that's usual, okay? You also need to think about the fact that, you know, many companies now, they're working in an agile process. They've got their user stories, they've got their sprints and so on, and they're very feature-based. And those features tend to get translated to articles. But of course, people aren't thinking about their features, they're thinking about tasks. So the difference between a folder, which is automatically watched, which is a feature, versus uploading content, which is a task that happens to use this feature and several others, you don't want to describe features when you list your product documentation. You want to describe tasks, okay? And then, of course, when you maintain documentation and there's a new sprint and some new features coming in, the question is not, oh, where should I add this feature? What, you know, in the table of contents? It's which task does it fit in? And sometimes that feature can appear in several tasks, okay? But you always think in terms of the tasks. And that, of course, is where meta tasks come in, or what are commonly known as workflows. So if I have my table, and very often I may have these workflows that traverse across a table of contents. And then it's kind of easy to imagine a workflow as a layer that is kind of sitting on top of your table of contents. And workflows are very, very common. You see them in many different places, okay? And of course, you could have the same content from workflows. So you can have somebody with one goal and somebody with another goal going over the same content in a slightly different order. A bit like having a different playlist. So you have one pool of content, okay, and then you have a playlist for the gym and a playlist for, you know, a country walk, or a playlist for relaxing afternoon, and so on. So depending on your goal, you would have different workflows through your content, and those can be layer upon layer, right? Or there are some cases where workflows traverse multiple products and publications. And that's something that you must also consider when you are thinking about customer tasks. Okay? There's also something else to consider, which is that if your analytics engine tells you that many of your audience are working on a mobile device, then there is such a thing as writing especially for mobile. It's not just about UI. So when you have a narrower screen, there are things that you need to consider, like, for example, the length of a paragraph. Okay, so if you have some text and you're looking at it on a wide screen, okay, that text may take up 1 or 2 lines and it doesn't look so intimidating. But the moment that you have a very narrow screen and you're looking at it in portrait mode, well, it wraps and wraps and wraps and wraps, and suddenly a paragraph that can be relatively short can take up 5, 6, 7, maybe an entire screen sometimes. And that can be very detrimental to the attractiveness of a topic, right? So you want to try to keep your paragraphs shorter. You'll want to have tables that are not many columns wide, because each column makes your screen even narrower, right? So you want to have thinner tables, that means fewer columns. You want to have smaller text, smaller words within a column even, okay? So this is very important to consider. And for those systems that support dynamic tables, those can make those even shorter by searching within a table and reducing the number of rows in a table. Okay. Also, of course, titles, right? So we all know what long titles can be sometimes in our publications, and technical writers are famous for having these hideously long titles. So those also wrap on a thin screen. So think about how that looks too. It's very important, okay? The last thing that I wanted to talk about is analytics, okay? So whichever analytics you use, it's probably, if you're putting your content out on the web, okay, then you'll want to check how people are using your content, right? It's very important. Okay, and there is such a thing as data-driven documentation, DDD or 3D, because it really adds a dimension to your documentation, right? And it allows you to quantify the value of documentation to your company. This is, again, hugely important. And then you can start to make decisions based on the data. Now, data by itself is bland, right? It's just numbers, right? Data on its own is not useful, right? Data combined with goals, that's when suddenly things get interesting, right? Because you may have a goal that's been given to you by your manager, or you may have a goal that's been given to you by your senior manager, right? So they have this overall thing of customer focus, right? Well, you can definitely put up your hand and say customer focus after you've gone through a rewrite like this. But that data can then really further your goals, okay? So if you understand where you are heading, then, and you track the data over time, then either the data is showing that you're moving away from your goal or moving towards your goal. So data adds judgment. Sorry, goals add judgment to your data, okay? So for example, if you're trying to attract more audience, more traffic to your website, to your product content, well, there is the data that shows that, and then you can think, okay, so how can I make my content more attractive so that people will keep returning to it? For example, you know, that every time they return, they get more value, not just the same stale content again and again. It can, of course, help you create better content. So, for example, if your analytics is telling you that most people are on mobile or most people are on desktop, that will help you, just as we spoke about before, in determining the kind of content you want to write. Okay? Or, for example, how well people are responding to search. So, for example, it's very easy for an analytics engine to see if people are searching and then clicking on something, or are they not clicking on anything, right? So if you do a search and you don't click on something, then that's a failure, right? And then you want to look at those search phrases and figure out, what is it about my content that made this search fail? And how can I improve my content to make this search pull more traction, right? Get more. And of course, you can show your value to management, because every time somebody does click on an answer, well, that's a saved call right there, okay? And that has a quantifiable value, which is extremely important in today's world where budgets are being squeezed. It's very important to show how you really do make a real contribution, not an imagined contribution, a real contribution to the company, okay? You also, if you have localized content, if you translate your content into different languages, well, that's a very expensive process, as some of you will know. And you can use analytics to determine how much traction the other languages are getting. And then perhaps you might want to set a threshold to say, if my content is not getting more than, say, 3% of my, or 5% of my audience, I'm not going to invest the time in and the expense in localization. That's something that I think managers, especially with the cost of localization, that's going to be an extremely important saving that they might be interested in doing. And of course, there is the wider world, right? So as we spoke about before, your customer does not have you at the center of their world, right? They're using many other products, they're doing many other things, they're not just interested in your product. So what does that mean? That means that they are aware when a competitor is releasing a feature and they are interested in searching for it in your site. What do you have to show for yourself, right? So if they come up with this term that your competitor is using, you know you have this feature, but you've called it something different, then maybe you want to change your search engine so that when somebody types in that word, they find your equivalent word, right? Or for example, if you are if your marketing department has come up with a new feature, right? They may be very interested to know if people are now searching for this, okay? So there are lots of ways that you can use analytics in order to help you up your game, to make your content better, okay? So we're coming up to the top of the hour, and here are our key takeaways, all right? First thing up is that tools are not a compensation for poor content. Good content is good content, right? And you need to be able to write for your audience, which is such a cliche, but there is a very structured process as we've spoken about today. You can isolate real customer tasks by targeting real people in the company that you work for, right? So you target those personas, you figure out who they are, you figure out the reason that they purchased this product and their reason for using the product, the value that they gain from it. This gives you the customer tasks that you arrange in a table of contents or in several trees for each product that you have. So you can do this and iterate across your entire product library. And then take a leaf out of the journalist book. Use the inverted pyramid to write with minimalism and to really focus what people need to know. Because when you land on a topic, okay, you need to know precisely why that topic is useful to me, okay? And you need to be able to explain, if this isn't the topic, here are some other topics that you may find interesting in related links that might be the hit that you're interested in, okay? And then finally, we spoke about workflows as meta tasks that allow you to see across publications even. And we spoke about writing for mobile devices and about analytics and how that can help you up your game. So with that, I thank you all very much for your attention today. So I think we're going to open this up for questions, right?
Yes, we are. Thanks, Lawrence. You got us thinking about things that we should be thinking about and maybe haven't been. You know, it's a time to regroup, I guess. That's a
Right.
good way to put it. So that was great. If you have a question for Lawrence, please type them in the question dialogue, and we'll try to get through those as much as we can. There was one in the very beginning, Lawrence, and you probably answered that. The question is, how do you choose the title of your topic? This was in the very beginning. I assume user detail page has multiple options on it. How do you decide they are most likely trying to change the password?
Oh, that's a great question.
User task for each searchable option. Yeah. So.
Right, right. So this is a really interesting question, because one of the things that we do in product documentation is that we have context-sensitive help, CSH. Now, CSH puts a question mark on a page and leads you to a topic, a single topic for that page. Now, that page may have many tasks that it could be a part of, not just a single task. So the nice thing about these conversations is that your product manager may start arranging the UI much more along customer tasks. But in the meantime, they haven't done that because they haven't been thinking about customer tasks. They've been thinking about features, okay? So when you write a topic and its target is a CSH from a single page that has many tasks, what most people do in that case is that when you click on the help, you get a redirect page. So it's kind of a landing page, and it says, you probably came to this page in the product because you could have been doing this, 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 or this. Choose your task, right? And then you can get redirected to a task which fits why the person was there. So in a user management page, right, where you have a whole bunch of things, one of those tasks listed would be change your password, okay? And people come across this problem because of CSH, because they're encouraged to write a single topic for a page that may cover 12 different tasks, right? So that's what you normally do. You solve that with landing pages. These landing pages are kind of a jumping off point for all of the different real tasks that customers are using. And this then feeds back to the design of the product, because once you start this conversation of thinking like a customer, and you are in a position of leadership here, you are thinking about the customer obsessively. You are a writer because you are a communicator, so you're good at putting yourself inside the shoes of somebody else. And as a result, you can really leverage that, and you can start to encourage conversations, to spawn these new conversations that can lead to real change around the company. It's happened to me personally several times that we've had product design that has been driven by documentation. I know that's kind of the tail wagging the dog, but it really does work, and it's incredible, and it changes everything.
You can't see me, but I'm smiling at that last comment. That was great.
Okay.
The one person asked if you would go back once that they can grab the screenshot of your takeaways.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, but this is also recorded, so
yes.
so you'll be able to get
that as well. Okay,
sure.
So related to the topic we just had, and I think you answered it because, but I'll ask the question anyhow. It says processes are different at different using the product, different stages.
So there's no need to create a universal topic. Okay, one of the things that we talk about a great deal nowadays is personalization. And the reason that you have personalization is because different people have different perspectives on the same thing, right? So you have lots of different tools that talk about personalization and everything, but I just want to talk about the content for a second. If you have an administrator, okay, who can add a new user to your system, say, okay? You can add a new user by using the UI, okay, by clicking some buttons and filling in some fields. You could add a new user as part of a script, as a command line, for example, just saying, or you can add it programmatically as part of an API, right? Now, it's all the same task, adding a user, but that's for 3 completely different roles. So I create a single task for all 3. Create a task called adding a user. Maybe you want to have a jumping off point. So you would have a landing page for adding a user and then split it up by roles. But basically, you would have the same title, but each one would be tagged with metadata that would determine the role of the person you're writing to. So I don't see the benefit of having a universal topic. It just adds noise. And especially in today's world where content is highly personalized, it means that people are expecting content to be served to them that is that has been molded around their needs. Okay?
Yeah. All right. This person is asking or made a comment that they loved your example of the value of analytics. Can you provide any other examples of practical use for analytics to objectively demonstrate the value of your content?
Oh, don't get me started. There's a gazillion things that you can do with analytics to show the value of your content. Really, it just goes on and on and on. Like, for example, I like to measure in analytics not the things that are most popular, because that's what lots of analytics engines do. And I find that mildly interesting, but I'm much more interested in actionable insights. So things, for example, like the least viewed topics. Now, I'm very interested in the least viewed topics, not because I'm particularly proud of it, but because there's an action item there. Why are people not getting to this content? Maybe it's not very intelligible. Maybe it's not usable. Maybe I'm using the wrong terms and people are searching for things, trying to find it, but never getting to it. Why is there content which is cold and not hot, right? I want all of my content to be hot, right? Especially the latest content. Or imagine if people are getting to content, but they're getting to my older content and they're not getting to my brand shiny new content, right? So these are lots of things that I love looking at when I look at analytics. I want to be able to see not just the things that people are seeing, but the things that people are not seeing. For example, are there searches that people are entering and failing? Right? These are the things, I know I'm a little bit of a pessimist, but I do focus on failure because it helps me up my game. It helps me make better content. If I find out why people are failing, I can write my content better, or I can tweak my search engines better, or I can add those synonyms or change the weightings or whatever it is I'm going to do on navigation to, highlight certain topics to make my content more effective. So I love analytics. I love analytics because the data together with my goals can really drive me to up my game, to make a much better documentation library.
Okay, we got a lot of good questions coming in. I'm not sure where we want to go next. So
Okay.
this is the part that I was smiling at, and this person is asking a question too, is can you talk about how to drive product design using documentation, or how to at least start that conversation with the product managers or the product teams?
Right, great. So as I said, this happened to me a couple of times, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting because it kind of, I didn't set out for this to happen. Actually, frankly, I didn't expect it. I didn't think it was possible, and it wasn't even on my horizon, but it just arose automatically, because the questions that I am asking are actually the questions that everyone should be asking, right? It's just that they're too busy with how things are done, and too busy with feature names, and too busy with internal jargon, and they forget about the person driving in their car on the way to work. And that's why it's such an amazing litmus test. It's such an amazing acid test. It grounds you and takes, you know, all of the noise disappears, and you're left with an extremely clear vision of a person behind the wheel thinking about what they have to do, where you are no longer the center of the world. Now they have a million other things that they need to do, and they have you as well as a little bit, you know, lucky 10 minutes in their day or 1 hour in their day where they have to do something with your product. And then they're not going to use it again for a week, maybe. Okay. So first of all, it's very humbling for people who sit and swim in their product every day. And second of all, it's the question everyone should ask. So these conversations begin. Okay, you ask these questions. You are focused on getting your table of contents and getting your tree of tasks. Okay, that's your immediate focus. But without realizing it, you have an interlocutor. There is somebody that you are talking to, and there are things going on inside his or her mind as well. And then suddenly, conversations begin to emerge, and as you start asking more questions, comparing trees with different audience, with different people in the organization, like, you know, with the salespeople and with the customer success people and so on, this generates conversations, and then you can come up with a tree. You show it to your manager, you show it to a few other people, and amazing things start to happen. Like, for example, people who only focus on their own little product and their own little features, because everybody else saying, well, actually, we've got 3 products that do exactly the same thing, or 3 areas of the product that do exactly the same thing. When should people use this or that or this? And because you're so task-based, suddenly you don't care which screens are being used. You care what the task is. So why are we offering people 3 ways to do the same thing? Isn't that a waste? And you have these conversations that come up as part of you doing your job. And this is how documentation can really drive the design process. So in my case, in one company I was in a long time ago, when I was young, so I was in a company that I was asking these very questions, and in the end, the conversations ended up with us realizing that that would cover all of the company's products, and of course, nobody had thought about all together, but of course, it was the dream of the company that all of their customers would buy multiple products, not just a single one, right? So customers were having to face this reality all the time, but nobody inside the company was thinking on a solution level. They were thinking on a product level. So having surfaced the insanities sometimes, the overlaps, or the lack of coordination between these different products, and putting it in a document that was going to be published to customers, it drove a massive change in the organization, and all the way up to the CEO. Everybody started talking about solution architecture, solution thinking, and selling packages of products, not just a single product, and bundling them all together and so on. So the documentation ended up changing the way the company saw itself, saw its products, and sold and made money. It changed everything. It was incredible. So this definitely does happen, but it doesn't happen because you're grabbing for power or something. It just happens organically.
Right, right. Someone says, thank you, great presentation, but then they also wanted to say, can you expand on the solutions thinking? And I think you just did that, but maybe you want to do a little bit more when creating the workflows that traverse multiple products and publications.
Oh, that's excellent. Right. So this is an example. It's like a mini solution guide in a way when you have these workflows. So when you think of your day, right, you think of the things that you do. If you're using Microsoft Office and you go from one product into another and then into something else in order to do your job, and then you send something out by email in a third product and so on. You do it all the time. You do it all the time. As a customer, you dip in and out of products because your world is much bigger than a single product. And that's exactly what happens when you start thinking about customer tasks. You start thinking about their world. And their world is not limited or even interested in the walls of your product. They are interested in their world and getting their job done. And so very quickly, you transcend the walls of a product, and you have, I'm telling you, it's like opening a window. It's amazing. The clarity that comes in and the perspective that comes in just by asking these very pertinent questions, it changes paradigms and allows many more things to flow from that, because you're seeing much bigger than a product. And then, of course, you know, there are so many technical writers who are very closely wedded to the engineers, to R&D, to the programmers, to the people, the hardware engineers, whoever it is, who are making the product. But I think the most important takeaway from this presentation might be that the SMEs that you have traditionally gone to in order to get questions answered, they can only answer how something was done. And very often, that's not even something you're allowed to write, because you don't want to write how something was done, because then your competitors can also, you know, emulate the algorithm. You don't want to do that. You want to say what was done, and you want to say how to configure it in the system, and they'll help you with that. But they can't tell you what you're doing it for, why you're doing it, what's the value, why did you buy it, what were you thinking when you came to this page in the first place. They're not there. They're just implementing the decisions of people who supposedly know what the customer wants. So these conversations are hugely refreshing on many, many levels. And a lot of people I have found benefit from it much wider than just the technical writers who are trying to implement a task tree. That they're doing much more.
All right.
So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. By the way, someone responded, "Hey, great answer to my questions." So not only are they liking the presentation, they're liking your answers as well to these slides. Okay, or these questions. All right. Here's one about the pyramid, the inverted pyramid, and they suggested that there should be an adjustment to have that tech writers have to make to include warnings before procedures. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Oh, great one. Excellent. Okay. So this is great. This is a really great question, and it's an issue that comes up a great deal. It goes like this. What should I use? I think the best thing to use is as an analogy, is a washing machine. Okay, now I purchased a washing machine about a year ago, a new washing machine. I don't know about you, but washing machines have this exceptionally unique technical writing teams, right? Okay, because I buy these washing machines or dishwashers, whatever it is, and then I'm looking at the washing machine, I'm looking at the pamphlet that came with it, and invariably, first of all, they write for like 7 different models, and they're all printed there in this single thing, so it's totally non-personalized. Okay, that's the first thing. Okay, so they're writing for an entire series that some have extra bits, some don't. And of course, in order to figure out which one you have, you need to check your model, which is always on the back, and awful, right? So it's awful technical writing, in my opinion. Hope I'm not offending anyone here. And the other thing that you notice about this thing is that there are loads and loads and loads and loads of warnings. Now, I get it, and it's okay. Warnings are required for legal reasons. Okay, we don't want anybody to get hurt, and we don't want anybody to sprain their back, and we don't want anybody to get electrocuted or whatever. So the warnings are very important, and they must be there for regulatory purposes, which is okay. But you must also consider the flow of your content. Okay. So imagine being on the other side for a minute. Imagine being the person who purchased the dishwasher for a moment, or the washing machine, okay? And imagine having to read through all of this. What do? Do you read those warnings? Do you read every single one? Or do you just try to avoid them because you kind of understand that they have to be there, and then you're just looking for the actual stuff that you are actually looking for? So warnings are never a task. They're something that I have to say. They're kind of in there. They get in the way of what I'm trying to say from a writer's point of view. They get in the way from a user's point of view, but we all agree that they must be there. So what do? Is it most important? Is it my 5 W's? I don't think so. It's definitely not my 5 W's. It's probably a feature of my steps, that before I begin, I must remember to do this, and I must remember to do that, and so on. So if I were to put warnings somewhere, I would put a warning as one of the steps, or as one of the prerequisites to a step, because it's about how to do it. It's not about what you need to do. It's not about why you need to do it. You're not doing it in order to have a warning. You're doing it because you want to wash your clothes or wash your dishes, right? That's your goal, right? And you want to, if you want to know if there's a fast mode and a slow mode, and you have all of these goals in your mind, but you need to have these warnings when you do something, right? So they are actually part of the how. They are almost a detail of the how, and that needs to be a note in a step, perhaps. That's what I would say, or a prerequisite.
Right, here's a follow-up question to that from somebody else. They said, the inverted pyramid for journalists' way of thinking is about providing the most newsworthy information first, then important details, and then other general background details. But practically, in companies, the thinking is the other way around. First, provide the conceptual input, then the scenario use cases, examples, and then the procedural input or tasks, etc. Does that mean these companies are diluting the importance of the content by following a non-generalist way of thinking?
So great. I love these questions. This is really excellent. No, really, they are excellent questions. So this is not a reality way of thinking and not a company way of thinking. It's a book way of thinking. Okay, so in the olden days, right, in the old-fashioned days, when we had books, when we had PDFs, or we had physical books, it would be reasonable to open a book and to start with the overview and to understand my concepts and to get into my world of concepts and everything else. So I'm in my overview, and it's reasonable to assume that I read chapter 2 before I read chapter 22. So there is an order to the way that things work. And in that world, you can take your sweet time. It's very nice. So you lay out your world, you lay out your concepts, and then you start with, you know, an overview. Let me take you around the screen and let me do this. And you're kind of flowing through in this very flowing kind of way. But then along came the internet and along came Google, and everything changed. Because now I go to Google, I do a search, and I land on chapter 22. Or I go to a documentation portal and I land on page 22 because that's my search result. Now I can no longer assume, nor can I demand, that people go back and read page 1. And there's a famous technical writer in the technical writing world who coined the adage that every page is now page 1. And that is totally correct. In a world of search and in a world of the internet, every page really is page 1. And so you don't have the luxury anymore of getting people into the world. And once again, I would urge you to think that your product is not the center of their world. They don't have time to learn about your world. They have a job to do. So your job is to try to be the bridge between the world of the engineers and the whole vocabulary that they have built and the customer, who is not in your world and doesn't have a lot of time to get into your world. Now, if you insist, they will, but they won't like it. They don't want to be inside your world. They want to be inside their world. So the most successful documentation is the documentation that manages to minimize the amount of background information that people need to have in order to get the job done. That's a successful documentation. There are lots of tricks that you can do. Like, for example, I once built a site that used a lot of jargon, but whenever that piece of jargon was being used, there was a dotted underline, and you would click on it and it would pull up a pop-up with the glossary definition of that term. So you would stay on the page. Let's say you landed on chapter 22, right? You would start reading, and there would be all of these words that you don't understand, but that's okay, because you can click on them if you don't know. You get a little pop-up, you see what it means, okay, you close it and you carry on, right? So there are ways around this. But I would argue that the world has changed. We no longer have the luxury of demanding that people start at page 1. And so it's not so much a company way of thinking, it's just a traditional writer's way of thinking that I think needs to catch up with today's world. Just like us, when we go home from our technical writing jobs and we're at home and something is wrong with our printer or something is wrong with the TV or whatever it is that we are looking up, right? We don't want to have to go into all of the background of why the PlayStation thinks like this or why the TV thinks like that and all of the different concepts. No, I have a problem. I need to get it solved. So if I do come across a term that I don't know, I expect to have, like I said earlier, a self-contained semantic unit that all of the information that I need to answer my question is there on that page without it being a whole book in a page, of course.
Right. And I just want to do a real quick plug for our minimalism training that we have going on starting July 8th. So that's a great way to learn how to apply some of these concepts that Lawrence is talking about. And I'm going to throw one more question in. There's a couple of other questions, so you may have to follow up with those folks afterwards. But here's a question about personas, because you know, you talked about having these writing personas. Are you aware of any companies that are writing different versions of the same content for each one of their personas or their popular personas?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
If so, what's the ideal way to do that?
So the ideal way is metadata, actually. So there is the content itself, which you write, and then there are the tags that you apply to that content, which sit on top of the content. So there's the data, and there's the data on top of the data. That's the metadata. So those are the tags. So what you can do is you can write lots of content, and then you tag it. So you tag it for different roles, for different personas. So you would tag something for a developer, or you would tag something for an administrator, for a super user, whatever it is that you're doing. And you tag all of your content this way, okay? And then once you've applied those tags, then depending on how you're consuming the content, if your system is cool and clever, then it would know how to personalize the user experience of each one, so that a developer comes in and sees only the appropriate, or mostly the appropriate information for a developer. And if I declare myself as an admin, then I'll see mostly content for an admin, and so on. So the key to that is not just the writing, but the tagging that goes with it. And then you have content that is personalized for each one. And then you don't have the washing machine syndrome, where everybody gets the same pamphlet, and may the Lord have mercy, right? it's very tough.
Yeah. Well, there's thank you so much, Lawrence. There were lots of questions that came in as comments about awesome presentation, great job. But this one I like the best, and I'm going to end with this one. It says, fabulous presentation, well thought out, well articulated, much to think about.
Wow, how nice. That's very nice. Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Thanks so much. And as Lawrence mentioned, is it you that's going to be speaking at the Ideas Conference, or is it somebody else from Zoomin?
Yeah. I'm gonna be speaking at the Ideas Conference about the language of images, and about the ways to make graphics. There are certain best practices that make graphics communicate really well. So this is what we're going to be talking about. That's my presentation in the Ideas Conference.
Great, and I hope some of you can join us for the Ideas Conference. That'd be wonderful. And I know you guys also are going to be speaking at the Convex event as well. So lots of different times to catch up with Lawrence and the other folks there at Zoomin. And we really appreciate everybody's time today. And thanks again, Lawrence, and everybody have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, whatever it is where you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.